Hello everybody and welcome to episode 3 of Serious Talk, where I talk about shit that's a little more important to me than some of the stuff I cover in my videos. This week, we are here with Leo Convoy, a friend of mine. Introduce yourself to the people, Leo.
Hello, I am Leo Convoy. I am an old man who likes old man things.
Well, I can't say that's inaccurate. The subject of this episode is going to be the recent resurgence of Toon Critic, a retrospective of the original incident, and how best to handle situations like these. For those of you who aren't in the know, Toon Critic has reared his ugly top hat gilded head and is currently harassing people in the Sonic the Hedgehog fandom. I will put links to FNGR's videos on the subject in the description. I know I don't normally promote his content here, but I feel it's important for you to stay informed. A couple of people have come forward saying that he is still talking to and surrounding himself with minors and other easily influenced individuals, and we have reason to believe that he is still preying on minors and may in fact be preying on adult women as well. So, with the recent anniversary of the original incident and his secondary rise and comeback, I felt it was an important subject to discuss. Now, Leo, I want to get your opinion first on this whole situation. Not just Toon coming back, but the entire Toon debacle as a whole.
Well, part of the problem, of course, goes back to the fact that Toon had some very poor behavior even before he was outed as a pedophile specifically, whether it comes down to him groping women at conventions or just acting lecherous in general. And one thing you have to understand here, and again, I'm trying not to be too critical, and hopefully they won't repeat the mistake, but you can't give people a free pass for these type of actions even if they're your friends. That's the type of stuff you have to stop quick and readily, otherwise it's just going to keep going, especially if they think they're going to get away with it by playing your emotions or your values to do so. So that misstep needs to be corrected first and foremost. They need to be able to, and this goes for anybody, need to be able to identify the issue and tackle it immediately. Don't wait for it to become bigger. You don't feed a jackal in your group of sheep. You get it out while it's still a pup. That's how you have to handle this thing. There's an old saying that if you catch a fox in your hen house, you kill the fox unless you plan on losing more chickens. So you have to go and be proactive about things like this. If you find out that a friend of yours is being lecherous, you have a nice long conversation. You tell them very clearly that it better not happen again. If they're truly repentant, you won't have a single issue. If they are not, next time it happens, kick them immediately.
This is an assumption here, but from that I'm taking that you probably believe leaders in certain communities, not just members of fandoms, but community leaders as a whole, need to make it their responsibility to learn the warning signs of predators and abusers so that they can take responsibility and remove those lecherous individuals from the community.
Yes, especially to a point. The thing about being a community leader is it's a lot more than content creation. It's a lot more than having fans. But when you have a large group of people that trust you and rely on you, you do, at least in my opinion and my value system, have a certain duty of care when it comes to dealing with these people. I don't expect community leaders to, say, do what I do and actively hunt these people or constantly try to barrage them with reports and trying to find out where they live or anything. What I do expect them to do, though, is when they get the word, to at least spread it. Especially when it comes to something like, say, the brony community, where most of the people who are in the higher tier are more so there due to the fact that they've been promoted by their community. And as such, I believe they do have that duty of care that is a responsibility for them. And when it comes to spreading information, I've never asked for people to make full-fledged videos. That's kind of beyond the pale. It's not really something I think needs to be done, but at least retweeting or spreading awareness is the more admirable and actionable thing to do in this case. I believe that you cannot be a community leader of any type unless you have leadership abilities and are willing to take that on.
That's a fair assessment, in my opinion. Now, for some of my newer subscribers who aren't exactly familiar with what the Toon incident was, Zachary Kays was a serial abuser. He had cheated on every girlfriend and boyfriend he had ever had. He was incredibly perverse towards his platonic friends, me being one of them, very demeaning, especially if you were feminine presenting or feminine in any way. He was very possessive, and if you began to reject him, he would throw you away. When I began to explicitly condemn his actions and tell him to back off, I was thrown to the side, and I know several other people who had the same experiences as him. He was also known to get sexually promiscuous and, in fact, physically harass both adult women and teenagers at conventions. Last year, he was exposed as a pedophile, and we found out that his friends had known for up to a month before he was officially exposed that this was going on, and they had not told the public. I understand why they made the decisions they made, but they made just as many mistakes as the leakers, and I feel personally that the community has to hold each other accountable.
Yes, especially to a certain extent. Now, a little bit of a point of order here. Based on the information I have, and that I've been able to garner, it looks like, I think it was British Ninja, had found out what he was doing because the young lady approached him, right? Approached him telling
Indeed.
him, he said it was during the holidays. Now, my closest assessment to holidays would probably be around Christmas. At least that's my personal view. That's when he found out. And he didn't tell anybody right then and there because he didn't want to, and I quote, ruin the holidays. I mean, I would have done different. I'm just going to say that. Now, at some point between December 25th and January 25th, because this is the latest I can get it at, right? December 25th. Sega Sister had come to Vita with the logs of Toon and this young lady. And Vita had Jace censor all of them, all 500 logs. Throughout the entire night, he was able to get it done. Then Vita produced his video, and it came out on January 25th. So that's at least 1 month that they had information and did not release it. It wasn't until, let's see here. It wasn't until, I think, February that they started actually talking about it in the open among the other analysts when it comes to their videos. I want to verify that real quick. Because I actually found out, not through Vita's video, but because I was subscribed to Mad Munction. I'm not anymore, but I was. Okay, it wasn't February, it was about 4 days later. The problem that came with this is, number one, their initial plan. And I'm not exactly sure. We had a podcast about it a while ago that I'm sure Patch will link in the description with Vita, and then Kichi and a Solar Flare and a couple other people came on. They weren't going to plan on putting out any information until Toon was in jail. But here's the problem. Number one, unfortunately, I think it might be due partially to age, partially to a lot of them being on the spectrum, and I don't mean that derogatorily. I mean that as a statement of fact. They don't know how law works. They probably thought they'd be able to report it to the FBI or whoever, and that Toon would magically be in jail in a week, but that's not how law works. There's always an investigation, and then possibly arrest, indictment, trial, conviction, or granted freedom. And that process, depending on everything that's going on, whether it be the court system itself, the amount of cases it has to cover, the power of the police force, the power of the court system itself, can take anywhere from a month to years, depending on what's going on here. There are murder cases that happened 7-8 years ago that still haven't gone to trial yet, if that gives you any indication here. So they were very short-sighted. And what could have happened had Vita not put that video out, that a lot of people don't understand, is that during that time frame between them finally confronting Toon, which I don't remember what the exact day was, and Vita's video, Toon was already trying to get support behind the scenes. Had that information not leaked, Toon would not be running right now. He wouldn't have to have alt-IDs. He would have already had his own little personal army that he would have given whatever lies or excuses to, and would have been able to help bury this. So
he would have been Logan Pauling. Absolutely, yeah. I agree.
It would have been mistakes all around, and there have been, but in this case, the happy accident that led where we are now is the best case scenario for what happened. The key thing here is when you have a predator, especially of this degree, you have to don't Google how to report it, because apparently that's what they did. And whoever it was, I'm not going to put name out there, but Googled it instead of actually calling the police to find out, how do I file this? Because when I called the Chicago PD to see if a file had been put out on him, they said the proper procedure is you are to call your local precinct with all the information, hand it off to them via email or whatever. They will investigate on their end, and if they think it is in any way credible, they will pass it over to the PD of whoever is the person guilty of those actions, or allegedly guilty of those actions. And what you want to do here is, when you have a pedophile, specifically like Toon Critic, number one, you already had his address. That's good. You have his full name. Also good. But the point is, it shouldn't have ever gotten this far. They should have had a game plan beforehand. And I know that hindsight's always going to be 20/20, but it would do the brony community a bit of good to get out of the fiction and understand how the real world works. And that's something I've noticed. They seem to be somewhat mentally stunted in their development. I don't know why. I couldn't tell you. I know a lot of them are young. I've dealt with people in your community, or the brony community rather, between the ages of 13 and, well, honestly, Anthony's age, 38 or 39. But most of them in that gamut, they're not smooth brain type of dumb. They're not Neanderthal type of dumb. They're childish type of foolish, to where they're in their 20s and they're saying, oh, this person online's bullying me, instead of just blocking them and telling them to piss off or whatever. So they take instances like this and they don't know how to deal with them because they haven't had that level of adversity in their life before. It's going to take a little bit more education and toughening up going forward to be able to properly deal with things like this. And if they cannot deal with it, they need to have people they can rely on to help them and show them how to do it. And part of the issue is, whenever this was released, and all these analysts and people in Toon Circle who are no longer associated with him, credit where it's due, they just wanted it dropped and not discussed. And you cannot do that in a massive community, especially if you are a leader or a figurehead. You have to have open discussions about these. You can't just say your piece and then shut everybody out. That is bad form. It is bad optics. It is bad principles. You, me, all of us are accountable for our actions or lack thereof. And in this case, they should have opened the floor, whether it be a giant podcast, whether it be a live stream. They should have been able to deal with this better and more professionally and more like adults, and they didn't. I don't know why, but it can't happen again.
And I will give some credit where it's due. There were members of the brony community that did hold podcasts and address questions from the community and try to be open about this. Voice of Reason was unusually tactful during this time. Kichi was incredibly tactful in her management of the situation. Even Irish John, someone whom I have had struggles communicating with in the past, was incredibly tactful in his behavior, and I appreciate that they reached out to the community, answered questions, tried to keep the discussion open and clean. And I can understand why other people would want to shut down during this situation. A lot of community members did not choose to be as renowned in the brony community as they are, and they felt overwhelmed by the desire to discuss this. I can understand from a personal standpoint why they made the decisions they made. And sometimes people have a right to be selfish, but there comes a point where your comfort and other people's safety have to be weighed, and you have to decide what's more important to you.
Correct. I don't disagree, and I understand Nina.
I need to step away for a moment. Pause for a second.
Just give me a second here to do that. All right.
Okay. So, with the retrospective in mind, how do you think he was able to come back from this incident so quickly?
A couple reasons. Number one, he had apparently some sort of secret Discord and Skype group for people who supported him, because there were still some people who unfortunately took a children's show's morals to its literal extreme and tried to back him up because, he's totally learned his lesson, guys. We should forgive him.
Quite a few of them being children themselves.
Yeah. Not exactly the best look for literally anyone involved there. But also the fact that, again, I don't believe it was reported quite properly in any sense of the word. And as such, he's probably sitting at home thinking that he got away completely scot-free. We do know for a fact now that he has been keeping an eye on the brony community. We do know that he watches people regularly and that he sees what's going on here. And he feels extremely comfortable because nothing's happened to him. That's why he was able to bounce back the way he has.
And it seems he tends to insert himself into communities that aren't familiar with what's going on.
Yeah, but at the same time, he can't seem to keep his mouth shut about it, which is absolutely hilarious to me, because that just tells me that he's still an egotistical prick.
He wants the pity. He wants people to pity him for being ousted from a community as heavily disliked as the brony community.
And then he runs to the Sonic community and makes the same mistakes he did in the brony community. So for anybody out there who is trying to play the card of, he is sorry, and he has learned, he has not. He objectively has not.
We have, according to Buttons, 2 new victims. And although I have my issues with Buttons, and they have been thoroughly expressed on multiple live streams, the fact that they've been able to get in contact with 2 new victims, both American minors, that have been victimized by Mr. K's, shows concretely that he has not changed.
Generally, yeah. And I'd have to get with you about whether or not it's the same people I'm thinking of. What you need to do is there's unfortunately a mentality when it comes to the brony community that we should talk to everybody and have to spend time with everybody, and there's a massive obsession with role play within the brony community for whatever reason, and that can be extremely dangerous when you've got minors interacting with adults, especially when it's adults that lack any moral fiber or dignity to them. I've heard of minors who will get actually a spoken mind, of all people, help me take a look at a server that had a lot of role play and a lot of sexualized stuff to it. The person who originally owned the server bailed out of nowhere. We don't know why. And the person who was in charge of it didn't know how laws work. He didn't know what his requirements were for running a server, and did not have a single clue that people in his server were underage. And I 100% believe he didn't know, because one of the people that was in the call with us was underage, and he had talked to her several times. He never role-played with her, but other people in the chat did. And he was thoroughly convinced this girl was in her 20s. Never once even asked her age. He didn't know any better, allegedly. So when that came out while we were in the call, he freaked out. He panicked because he didn't know. And that's part of the problem. You have a lot of people that in their early teens or even younger interacting with people in their 20s or 30s, and that is a breeding ground for problem here. So you need to be more cognizant of where you are and stop pushing role play everywhere. I know it's big in the brony community. I don't know why, but it is a breeding ground for bad things to happen. Because that's ultimate. Go ahead.
Behaviorally speaking, roleplay is primarily a form of escapism that people who feel isolated from society will engage in. Hell, during my early years transitioning, I participated in roleplay consistently. I did it alongside my voice therapy and my other transition therapies as a way of coping with the fact that my family was not supportive of me. It was a proxy means of living as my truest self. And I understand why bronies do it, because I used to do it too. But there is a difference between healthy escapism and an addiction.
Yes.
And I think that the social ineptitude that's so wide in the community is not strictly as a result of mental handicaps, because I have met quite a few members of the community that are neurotypical. They have no handicaps. I think it's because a lot of them are addicted to escapism. And because of that, they've isolated themselves from real people.
That may very well be part of the problem. But
that doesn't excuse it.
No, not at all. And mostly it's not even the kids that I'd have to fuss at for this. It's the adults. When you're in your 20s, it is not hard to ask somebody, hey, how old are you, before you start any sort of erotic role play. it is not hard for you to not interact with people that are younger than you. At least in that massive a gap. While I'm in Barrel or Vita server, there's a couple people. One is 15, the other is 17. And I give them nothing but uncommon grief. We don't sit there and have goofy little role plays. We don't do any sort of erotic things in there. I treat them as I would any other person underage. I give them grief and make fun of them for being kids. Because I'm an old man and that is my right. But when you have a lot of other people, they don't even think to ask, hey, how old are you? They just immediately go in assuming everybody's an adult. Or in some cases, they intentionally don't ask age. So when you have people in your server that don't ask age and do it at that point intentionally, that's when you need to pull them aside and find out exactly the real reason why. Either they are intentionally being a predator or they're stupid. And in that case, in my opinion, both should probably be kicked.
I run several servers where minors are not allowed. I run several servers where there are specific rules for minors in the server so that they can't access NSFW content. And I have one server where there's no NSFW channel whatsoever in order to prevent my younger fans from getting exposed to that.
Correct.
It's not that hard for people to regulate their communities to make sure it's safe. Yes, children lie. Yes, teenagers lie. But as an adult, your job is to not care that they lie and do your job anyway. I know that none of us want to have to do this because it's tedious and it's irritating and it distracts from all of the awesome things that you can do as a content creator. And a lot of people that I am friends with will tell me that I'm wrong for saying this, but when you have a community, whether it's a Discord server, fans of a YouTube channel, a Patreon, a Twitter community, or hell, a subreddit, as somebody who is in charge of a group of people, who influences a group of people, you have a personal responsibility to decide what you want to do with that power. Correct. And if what you decide to do with that power is leave vulnerable people at risk, then you don't deserve the position you're in.
I agree. And in that case, at some point, the community has to decide what they're going to do about those people. And part of that is the community responding and responding appropriately. You don't want to give predators any sort of excuse. You don't want to give them any avenue to return. And the people who enable them, you don't want to give them that either.
There are people who are listening, and I want them to know that if you're hearing this, we are proud of you for doing your best to make sure this never happens again. But this doesn't just happen in the Brony community.
No, it happens in multiple communities. I've had people tell me it's happened in the Nintendo community, the Sonic community. Anything that attracts children is by its nature going to be a place where pedophiles and other sexual abusers are going to try to infiltrate if they're not there already. Because it's like having a savanna filled with gazelle and not expecting lions to show up. It is a prey, and you are going to attract predators by having prey around, whether it be physical, real-world, animalistic predators, like the example I gave, or sexual predators when it comes to children and weaker people. And unfortunately, communities like the Brony community is very susceptible to that because everyone is far too trusting of strangers. Okay. Lightning Bliss was talking about this earlier today on Twitter. Lightning Bliss, and she's talked about this previously, and I'm glad she's stepping up to talk about these things, and kudos to her for doing so. So if Lightning Bliss hears this, I appreciate that. I told you that in call specifically before. But she has a Facebook page where people contact her, and they tell her all sorts of things. Their real names, where they live, all their personal life stories. Guys, don't do that. Look, I know Lightning Bliss is a really approachable person, especially when you look at her content, but part of the problem is, when I was a kid, one of the things we were always told, tell no one your real name, tell no one where you live. Because the internet is literally filled with strangers. And what's one of the first things you learn as a kid when it comes to strangers, Patch?
To stay away from them at all costs.
And to not
stranger fucking danger.
Yes, do not talk to strangers. But here on the internet, since there's that wall of a computer screen and anonymity, a lot of people think, well, I could talk to this one person, right? Well, you may not be able to. These people are lucky Lightning Bliss isn't a predator. But what worries me, and her from what I saw, is you don't know who else they're telling this information to.
Yeah, that's definitely questionable behavior. And I know I have a demographic on this channel. About 30% of my subscribers are between the ages of 14 and 17. I don't know what the fuck you're doing here. I swear way too much for your tiny little brains. But you cannot be sharing that information with people. Not because YouTubers aren't nice, but because you don't know who else is getting a hold of that information. I spent 3 months communicating with Eliora before I was sure I could accept her offer to move in with her while I was a runaway. I had to make sure that she could be trusted, that it was safe to live with her and her boyfriend, soon-to-be husband. I had to work to make sure that this situation was safer than the one I was in and would be an improvement. Because otherwise I wouldn't be able to trust her with my information. You have to be that cautious with every person you try to befriend. Spend weeks, months, maybe even years making sure that they're safe before you share something even as ubiquitous as your name.
Correct. And more on the point, real quick, I want to touch this. What Pat's just said isn't some hard and fast rule. Don't sit there and tell yourself, especially if you're a kid, oh, I've talked to this person for 3 months. Patch did that. No, that's not the point. The point here is, if you are still a child, a little child, you probably shouldn't be talking to these people to begin with. You may think the YouTuber's nice. You don't know that person. Just because they put out content that you like doesn't mean you know that person. Especially not as intimately as their personal value systems or what they're like in real life. There are people who put out content that makes them seem like the funniest, friendliest person in the world. You meet them, they're absolute jerks. Don't ever assume that because somebody acts a specific way on YouTube or puts out content you like that they are a good person or that they are trustworthy. They may very well not be. They might be the biggest predator you've ever met. You just don't know it. Don't trust strangers.
This isn't just something online either.
No.
It's hard to trust people in real life. If you're a kid, you shouldn't be socializing with adults.
Correct.
I know that hurts to hear because you think that you're mature enough and intelligent enough to be able to match a grown-up blow for blow. But it doesn't matter how smart you think you are. If that adult, whether it's a very distant uncle who wants to get to know you better, or a YouTuber that you've been watching for years, if they decide that they want to hurt you and use your naivete and your trust in them to do it, if you give them the tools to do it, it won't stop them. Nothing will stop them. You have to be the one to protect yourself. Correct. I learned that the hard way.
Now, I want to address this because I know, especially when you're a teenager, you're starting to feel old man term. You're starting to feel your oats and all that. The minute an adult, like past the age of 18, and you are a teenager, starts talking to you about things like that, disengage immediately. It doesn't matter how long you've known them. It doesn't matter how well they know you or how well you think you know them. That can never, ever, 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 ever end well. Disengage, block them, go about your business. Because it doesn't matter how emotional you are, it doesn't matter how much of a bond you think you put. No adult with a decent level of morality or an understanding of what is good for you is going to try to get you to give them that type of information or engage you about that. That's why anytime somebody has passed that on to me, is like, well, what do I do about X situation? Ask your dad. Ask your mom. I'm not going to talk to you about things like that. That's your parents' job. Don't sit here and engage with people who want to do an ERP with you or want to talk to you about, oh, what's your fetish, what's your kink, especially when you're a teenager. Just stop. Assess what's going on here. Don't play yourself and don't let anybody play you. What they're doing is grooming you, and they're doing it intentionally.
And that's another thing. I feel like a lot of people don't understand what grooming in and of itself is. There seems to be a complete lack of understanding of it. So I feel like maybe we should touch on that for a couple of minutes.
Absolutely. You know the topic. Go for it.
Grooming is, in and of itself, the act of a person with power manipulating a person without power into trusting them. This could be a boyfriend and girlfriend. This could be an adult and a child, a teacher and a student. But the dynamic is always someone who has power, using that power to get the person they are trying to victimize to trust them. And there are 3 main methods. There is a showering of gifts, excessive amounts of compliments, and of course the ever popular, you're so mature. You're so mature for your age. You're so different from everyone else.
Yes.
They will try to make you feel special. And even when they're not preying on you sexually, predators who are trying to seek something from you, like manipulate money out of you, or want to gain your favor for political gain, they will use the fact that they make you feel special as an excuse to get you to do what they want.
And to go back to what you were saying about showering them with gifts and all that, there was an example specifically within the brony community that happened this past year. There was somebody who goes by the moniker of Headlong Equestria, and he's in his 20s, as far as I know, and the girl he was interested in and trying to date is 13, and he would constantly send her compliments about how cute she is and send her gifts and, get this, candy in the mail because she was dumb enough to tell him where she lived. This is a common tactic, and he got away with it for quite some time.
I will admit that I've fallen for that tactic too. A lot of victims of abuse fall for grooming tactics because we see it as just somebody trying to be nice to us, giving us gifts or compliments. But you have to be suspicious sometimes.
Absolutely.
Sometimes you have to say no matter how much you like this person.
Absolutely, without question, especially if you're a child and this person's an adult. And just so you guys know, I know that teenagers specifically, you guys think, oh, I'm 16, I'm 15, I'm more adult. You're not. You're not as adult as you think you are. Nobody is when it comes to that type of age. There is at no point where you should be able to sit there and rationalize, I can get in a relationship with somebody who's in their 20s and 30s because I am mentally an adult. No, you're not. You're not. And that's just what it comes down to. Not just logically, but biologically as well. The human brain doesn't stop developing physically until what, age 21, 25? So, yeah, so don't kid yourself because every teenager tries to kid themselves that way. You're not special. None of us are in that aspect. None of us are magically so much more mature than every other teenager when we're teenagers because we want to feel that way. Stick with people your own age. Or do what I did, be smart, and don't date until you're an adult because then you can actually do things.
And that's not to say that kids aren't smart, because you guys are. You're just not as smart as you think you are.
Yes, I believe the actual term is either hot or cold logic, and teenagers are more susceptible to activating hot logic, where they come to the decision based on emotion very quickly or peer pressure, whereas adults have a more developed sense of cold logic, to where we'll sit there and we'll think about something and we'll look at the long-term and short-term responses and consequences to our actions. Teenagers don't tend to because mentally they haven't developed to that point yet. They do, usually, at some point, but not all the time, and especially not at that age. So, cool your heels. Don't be in a hurry to grow up. Don't be in a hurry to do allegedly adult things. Age properly. And certainly don't talk to a whole bunch of strangers on the internet and try to get into a relationship with them, especially if they're older than you. That's bad. Bad idea. All around, there is no good that comes from that.
There's a couple more subjects I want to touch on before we finish the show. And one of them was, how did you come across the original Toon Critic drama?
Okay, so I am not a brony myself. I've seen the show, enjoyed what I saw of it, but I'm not a brony. I don't watch the show religiously. I'm just a big fan of animation in general. And unlike some other sophists who will say that to try to shield themselves, I'll sit there and I'll talk about Ralph Bakshi to you any day of the week. I'll talk about Don Bluth. I'll talk about the old men of Disney. When I say I like animation as a medium just in general. Whether it be BoJack Horseman or whether it be the original He-Man. We'll sit and talk about that. So I decided, back in 2016 I think it was, that I'd take a look at some of these analysts. And one that stuck out to me was, of course, Mad Munchkin, simply because I actually like quite a bit of her art style. I think she's an interesting person, until she blocked me on Twitter. That's another matter altogether. And when that broke, I've interacted enough with the brony community in my own life, because I go to conventions, and I have a friend that's really into it. And I've noticed bronies, unfortunately, are a little bit weak when it comes to hard decision making and making tough decisions, right? They're a lot more on the spectrum of we want to get along, we hate quote-unquote drama, they don't like negativity, which kills anything, by the way. I want to go ahead and say that right now. You've got to learn to deal with negativity. You have to. It's a vital, important, essential part of life. And when I saw how poorly this entire thing was handled, I had two choices. I can sit in the comment section and rage about it and expect somebody else to do something about it, which was unlikely, or I could do something myself. The entire reason I'm interacting with the Brony community right now, and the entire reason why I'm interacting with anyone in it, is because if I have the ability to do some good, if I have the ability to help, it is my responsibility to do so.
When you got involved, what was your thought process on that first video you released?
I am sick of seeing people waffling about and complaining about how badly it's affecting the fandom, about how it's affecting people's YouTube channels. They should have been more concerned with a child was prey to a predator that we've had in our midst this entire time. Let's collect ourselves, eject this guy, and figure out the best way to make sure this doesn't happen again. Instead, all I saw from the people whose videos I did talk about was, oh, this is going to affect the community. Oh, I don't like this negativity. Let's brush this on and go about our lives. That's not how reality works. The very first thought in the forefront of my mind is these people are stupid. I am very angry with how they dealt with it, and I expect better from literal adults. Those were my initial process thoughts. And to a point, they still are. I felt like somebody needed to have the testosterone and cojones to tell people, look, this isn't a matter of your community being seen as bad. This is a matter of the fact that this person had victims that none of you are actually talking about because you're more concerned about your channels. Get your heads out of your butts and get in gear here, or this is going to keep happening. And it will if they don't.
Do you think the community has improved at all since the original incident when it comes to how they handle predators?
I think certain people have. As far as the community as a whole, there is still this massive issue of and this is how it's always identified. I just don't like drama. And I told this to Looney, and I'll tell this to everybody here. This isn't about Sally cheating on Billy with Zane. This isn't high school petty soccer hop, whatever they call it, sock hop drama. This is about literal predators in your community. This is not a matter of you being able to stick your head in the sand and saying la 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 until it goes away. You need to nut up and you need to deal with these things properly. You do not have the right to ignore it because it's everyone's responsibility. And that's one of the major conflicts I've had when I've tried to either pass people this information or try to get them to pass it along. It's, well, I don't like to name names, or, well, I don't like to deal with drama. Sucker, this isn't drama. This is like if somebody in your community got shot and you didn't want to say anything about it. This is an active, aggressive, predatory situation. And the fact that we've outed, and I actually put a list to this, 21 people in the community the past year alone that have preyed specifically on children is very telling. And the saddest thing about this patch is that we didn't have to dig for these people. They were on a surface level. They weren't afraid. They were in plain sight. They felt unchallenged. They felt comfortable. And they were. Because no one was concerning themselves with it. Nobody looked. These people aren't hiding. They're in plain view. We had a guy in Vita's server named Foul, or Dark Edge as he went by in some cases, that while we were constantly hunting pedophiles, and I of course still am, he was there. In plain sight, seeing what we were doing. And it wasn't until Sheldon came forward with something Mint had told him that, yeah, while we're sitting here hunting pedophiles, there's one clown in our server sending his dick to an underage girl. And we immediately outed him.
I am familiar with the Foul incident, and I am still disgusted that happened at all.
I am too. And we're sitting here rationalizing, like, how did this guy sit here and think he was going to get away with this, right? But that's the entire way the community's predators work. They always think they're going to get away with it. They never do when we find them, but they always think they do. And the only thing we can do at that point is to gather the evidence, find out where the person lives, report it to police. I'm not advocating or asking anybody to hunt these individuals down or do harm to them. I'm asking for proper channels, official things to be signed, and to pass the information on. That's all we can do. Keep people alert, keep people aware. And when the community finally grows up from its state of trying to turn everything into a value lesson from the show, we're not going to get anywhere until they do it, unfortunately. Here's the thing. There is not a single person in the community that's an adult that cannot do what I'm doing. They may not yell as loudly, they may not be as verbally aggressive, but any of them can do it. Lightning Bliss, any of them. Yeah, and the reason I use Lightning Bliss is because I know she's very soft demeanor. She could do this too. Any of us could. I'm not special. None of us are. We could all do this, and I think to a point we all should. I've had people say, well, you're awesome. No, I'm not. I'm just a regular guy with some convictions, and anyone can do that. Just be smart about it.
We need to hold each other to a higher standard than this. A much higher standard.
Absolutely. We all should.
We shouldn't be looking up to people for doing the bare minimum.
I agree. 100% correct. And unfortunately, part of the running community deals with the same problems what I've noticed the furry community has, is that the sexual component is a large part of it, whether they want to admit it or not. And most of the time they don't.
It's an incredibly vocal minority.
But
an incredibly vocal minority.
And it still gets traction. And because of that, people will go into these servers and kids will join in because, you know, especially when they're teenagers, the kids want to look at porn. And instead of having some sense, I can't tell you how many servers I got into where there's no, you know, NSWF warning. None of that. These people don't even know that by law they usually should have that covered. The person that I spoke to was spoken mine wasn't even aware of U.S. laws concerning lewd material and how it is to be shown and how it is to be protected. There's a reason why pornographic sites have you click a verification to tell them that you're 18. Because at that point, they've done their due diligence, and people who run servers like that should as well. Now, when it comes to accountability, there is something I'd like to do real quick. There are some people I have been in contact with. I'd like to thank them right now. The people who have been able to help me spread word. I'm talking about specifically analysts. So people like Hateful Tater Word, I absolutely appreciate their help. They've been instrumental. But people who have helped us spread word about stuff like this. Anthony's been absolutely fantastic about it. He lets us live stream on his channel to get to a larger audience whenever we do out one of these people. Golden Fox has spread information, Keyframe, Kichi, ANY. Several people. Lightning Bliss has as well. Josh did a couple times, and we really appreciate it. That's important for you guys to do that and to continue to do so. You need to show kindness and you need to show care for the community to help you build into who you are now. And there are some more analysts I really wish would do that, but unfortunately right now they don't seem inclined to, or insert excuse here. And that's all the way I see it at this point. If I was being an obnoxious prick and just asking them to make videos every time, I could see why I could be dismissed. But it takes less than a second to hit retweet. Takes less than a second. Now, if they're worried about verified information, that's why we make everything very clear. There are things we need to make sure of every time we out a pedophile. Number one, that this person knew the person was underage. That's why we need screen caps of that. We need evidence that they did sexually communicate, whether it be sending a picture or an ERP chat log, right, with dates on it. So we can make sure that it's verified this person knew what they were doing. Because we have ran into instances where somebody said, hey, this person ERP'd with me, and I'm 12 or whatever. And I'm like, all right, I need to know where he saw how old you were. And the response is, well, actually, I told him I was 18. Well, I can't do anything about that. Nobody can. And if the person on the other end, and we've had this happen before too, we're like, did you know this person was like 13? Be like, oh God, no. That is another matter altogether. Like, if somebody lies to you on the internet, my recommendation, of course, is just don't ERP with people, period. But as you know, I'm a prude, so there's that. But it's just, yeah, as a community, you have to reject things like this. Because it can't just be one or two people, because you won't get any traction. But in cases like this, it doesn't matter what area of the political spectrum you're on. It doesn't matter what area of the theological spectrum you are or are not on. If there's one thing I've seen that will unite people, it's you don't dick with kids, and you don't dick with animals. And again, if anybody that's a higher up, for lack of a better word, or a community leader, needs help or needs to talk to somebody about the best way to deal with this, again, I'm on Twitter. My DMs are open. Even if I don't like you as a person, I'm always willing to talk, especially if it's going to help somebody. The entire reason I'm here is to help people. If I was here just to be a big mean bully, you'd be seeing a little bit different content from me.
And even if you can't get involved due to mental health constraints or life problems, but there's a difference between taking a break to take care of yourself and the people you love and ignoring the problem entirely.
Absolutely. A good example of somebody who can balance both and has done so very well is actually a Midnight Chimes. Whenever there's something out there that needs to be covered, he will always put out something about it. Sometimes it's a video, sometimes it's just a tweet. Either way, it's appreciated. And he still does his own content. He still does tons of videos about Doctor Who, even though I don't know or care about Doctor Who. You can do both. The problem is you have to make sure to pace yourself. If you are not capable of handling the high-stress stuff that I do, you don't have to. No one's asking you to. And I'm not going to ask you to put your own mental or personal health at risk here. Just pass the information along. That's it.
There's this sort of fear that a lot of YouTubers have, especially in communities like Brony or Furry, or even in leftist circles, where they're afraid that if they get involved, they'll get flushed from the community because they're talking about something people don't like. But I feel like if you stand up for what you believe in, the people that you'll find that will support you are more important than the people who will leave you behind.
Correct. And in cases like this, I'd rather be known for what I stand against sometimes than who's best friends with me. And in this case, if your entire point is I don't like dealing with negativity like this, or that I don't like drama, and you try to get me to shut up about it or demand I take it elsewhere, you're in for a fight. I don't back down easily. I am way more aggressive than I probably should be.
But no one can say you're ineffective.
No? I mean, I've had people try to claim that. It doesn't work so well. Now, as far as what happens after I make the report, I don't know. It's not like police hand out that information directly to me. All I know is whenever I do find a pedophile and I am able to find their information, which again, I do in a completely legal way. Apparently I've been using the word doxing incorrectly. Guys, hate to tell you this, 9 times out of 10 when I find somebody, it's via the white pages. It's really simple. It's really public. And it's really, really easy. And I go from there and I report them. I give them the information they need and I move about my life. And I let everybody know who's the sicko, what they've done, and how to avoid them. Could they possibly just get an alt ID and go about their business? Sure. But people have patterns. And Toon has proven that unequivocally.
Now, the last thing I want to talk about is how to effectively prevent something like Toon from happening both in our own communities and in the Brony community in the future. What is the best way you think, or what's the best method that you prefer for preventing predators from gaining power in a community?
Accountability and vigilance.
Would you be willing to elaborate on that?
Okay. When it comes to vigilance, if you have a friend that's a bit more perverse in nature, or somebody who is kind of creepy, for whatever reason, whether it be something you can directly say or something you can't peg down, the vigilance aspect in this comes down to watching them, noticing their patterns, and seeing when something's astray, and making sure everybody knows they can come talk to you if there's an issue with anybody in your crew, right? The problem we had with Toon was, let's use Minty Root, for example, right? Now, I give Minty Root grief because my response, if Toon had done that if I had a plush, and Toon had done that, is there would have been new holes in the wall that would have been perfectly matched with Toon's head. But I'm also kind of high T and high aggression. Mint's not. But the problem is when Mint spoke up about it, Minty Root, he got drowned out. Not just by Toon's friends, or fans rather, but by his friends in the analysis community. Why? Because he built a reputation with them, and he was able to use them as their attack dogs to get Mint to leave him alone about it.
And
they should have
worked.
Go ahead.
And it usually worked better on people that his friends also didn't like.
Absolutely.
Massacre Molly, for an example, was another person who Toon victimized. in a far more severe way and was drowned out by the community. This was an established pattern. Toon's friends would always come to the fucking front lines to silence anyone who was bad-talking him, because how dare you talk about our friend this way? They didn't once consider, up until it was too late, that, oh, maybe this guy is actually terrible.
Yeah, and unfortunately that type of loyalty to dirtbags or people you think are your friends can have a counter effect, and that's why it has to be like with accountability, right? Just because the person that is making an accusation towards them is somebody you don't like doesn't mean you should take it any less seriously. It doesn't matter who's making the accusation. Look into it earnestly. If they are proven to be a liar, that point on, you deal with it accordingly. But any sort of statement like that is predatory in nature, you have to take 100% serious. And then go from there. At least in my value system. Now, you want me to evaluate or elaborate more on accountability and whatnot, so I will in this. When it comes to vigilance, you keep an eye on the people around you. You do your best to be aware of them and aware of what they're up to. Maybe not to exact extremes, but when you find out, hey, this person groped somebody, your response should be to look into it and find out what's going on, not to happily ignore it because it doesn't affect you directly, especially when you're within that friends group. And when it comes down to accountability, you have to make them accountable for their actions. And if you don't, at some point you become accountable for your lack of action. They could have dealt with Toon at any given time, and hopefully they learn from that. The moment Toon stuck someone's plush down his pants after an orgy, someone in the analysis community should have handed him his bags and kicked him. No questions. Because this wasn't something that just happened and nobody saw it happen. This is something that clearly did happen. And even if we were to discount that, all the times he had been groped somebody or apparently even got knocked in the teeth once for doing so, they should have had him pack his bags long before then, or even based on how he treats people. Because from what I understand, Toon tended to treat people very poorly. And you cannot have somebody within your group, within your setting, that constantly treats people poorly, especially when they're fans. That is a good sign of somebody who's deranged in a very aggressive and negative manner. What are your thoughts?
Well, I definitely agree on the points of vigilance and accountability. But in addition, I believe that a very important thing in regards to keeping your community safe is to educate yourself. Staying educated about what abusive behaviors are, what the signs of someone being abused are, and how to help those people this isn't just something for big-name YouTubers to do. This is something everyone should do.
Absolutely.
In fact, I believe these things should be taught in school. I think criminal law should be taught in high school. I think that psychology should be taught in high school. I think that basic medicine should be taught in high school because people should be educated on how to spot people that are dangerous.
We're too busy teaching the Pythagorean theorem. I'm sorry, we can't do that.
So, since the system isn't going to teach you, you have to teach yourself. Which is why I give resources to every relevant subject I talk about on this channel in the description. It doesn't matter if it's something as small as a shitty play or as big as a mass shooting. Staying informed, staying educated, and staying safe should always be your number one priority in life. Because you won't be able to achieve your dreams if you're dead.
This is true. 100%.
And the best way to stay safe is to stay educated. And the way the world is right now, the important information is passing you by. It's not exactly everyone's fault. I don't blame the people who were manipulated by Zach for his actions. I don't blame them for falling into a cycle of abuse with him, because they were a little too blinded by the... To put it in a BoJack Horseman reference... All the red flags just look like flags when you're wearing rose-tinted glasses.
Yeah, well, at some point they've got to grow up and we've got to realize just because this person likes something I like doesn't mean they're a good person.
There's one more thing I want to talk about before we end the show.
Sure.
There are a lot of people who have used the Toon Critic incident as a means of bolstering their own agendas. Whether it's people trying to take down Lily, or people trying to take down Josh, or people trying to take down multiple individuals in the community that made mistakes. This whole debacle has become a weapon for people to use against each other, and personally, I believe that's incredibly irresponsible and selfish. And I wanted to get your perspective on the people who tried to use these events as a means of taking down people they don't like instead of focusing on the victims.
I think that when you have people, especially if they're hyper-focused, and I know that Lily is not a popular person. I know Lily can be a fairly terrible one. But if the conversation's about one thing, don't sea lion it. Don't sit there and try to turn it into another personal crusade about something or else. You have to stay on topic if you want to be effective here. Don't try to use, especially a tragedy of any sort, to further your personal means or goals. That is morally vile, and it is not a functional method of dealing with or about anything. You have to be able to separate that and deal with one target at a time when it comes to things like that. Never once should any of this communication be turned into but Lily or but Josh. I have my issues with Josh, theologically, personally, morally, but my intention is to make people be aware of their accountability and what they should have done to prevent this and how to prevent it going forward. I have long since, in my own mind, said, Josh probably should have looked into this better. He probably shouldn't have tried to pick this up and carry it. Pass it on to somebody who knows what they're doing. I can understand them making mistakes this time, but I better not see those mistakes again. Because at that point, then the conversation, once we're done having it about the other predator that's outed, then we're going to turn and have a discussion about you.
Absolutely. Do you have any closing thoughts you'd like to share?
I just want people to do better. I want them to understand that I can't do this forever. I can't. I have other responsibilities in my life. I will, especially in the near future. I do get worn out. I do get tired. We need help, and we need more people to stand up and give us that help. It's great to have you guys in the comments section when I'm tearing into a pedophile on FNGR stream. That's fantastic. It's a great morale booster. But again, there's nothing I'm doing here that nobody else can do. Everybody can do this. Everybody.
No man is an island.
Exactly. And everyone can stand up. Everyone can eject these people. And we've got to get past the idea that this is just some petty drama. It's not. These are predators, and they're looking to harm people in your community. And if you don't care about that, you should probably leave. Because I'm not even part of the brony community. I just don't like kids getting hurt.
Well, thank you for coming on to Serious Talk and sitting down with me. I appreciate you being willing to discuss this, especially with what a difficult subject it can be. Is there anything you want to promote? Your channel, your artwork, anything you want to share with the community?
Well, if you like cartoons, there's my channel. I talk about all sorts of cartoons. I tend to focus more on 80s stuff because that's what I grew up on, but I'm always open to talk as long as you don't hit me at 2 o'clock in the morning because I am an old man. I do sleep during the night. I do have a job, a wife, and all that. So just keep in mind, I'm not one of the youngins. I'm not going to be up at 3 in the morning talking about Scooby-Doo or whatever. But a little bit of information you guys do need to understand here. And it's something that's stuck with me ever since I was a kid. Always better to have an honest enemy than a false friend. And you need to metabolize that. It's a very important lesson.
I think it's something we all need to learn. Thank you again for coming onto the show, and to all my listeners, I will see you guys next episode.
Goodbye.
Bye.
If I could change my ways, if I could change the rule of the time, would it still be the same? Would I still fade away with the time to be the king of kings? And how long will it last this time? Would it still be the Could you tell